All right, we're good to go, Rich?
We are running and
we're rocking and rolling. Elizabeth, ready to go?
Mm-hmm. All right.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks for doing this. I appreciate it.
So much.
This is like episode, I don't know, like 3 or something like that.
Well,
Can't Be Censored.
I'm glad because I can't be censored.
This is true. We're gonna get you to cuss a little bit later on, but we'll save that. Listen, I'm glad that you're doing this because I think that some people that are probably watching this platform, they have a certain perception of like this platform leans one way or the other.
Mm-hmm.
We just had Pierre on last episode, so you're a very good counterweight.
Good. Yeah,
but
Pierre and I've been friends a long time. I bet he didn't tell you that.
No, he didn't tell me that.
Yeah, we've known each other. I've known him since he was a little baby MP.
Really?
Well, yeah. Well, he got elected when he was 24.
Yeah.
And I wasn't in politics then. I was running a national office for Sierra Club in Ottawa. So I made a point of working with everybody and talking to everybody and bringing issues to everybody. But we always got along.
He strikes me as the same sort of person now as he was then.
Yeah.
Well,
he was always kind of like the class clown. Remember when it was John Baird named him Skippy?
Right.
And he loved it.
Okay,
Yeah.
Right.
No, there was some homelessness program called Skippy was the acronym. And anyway, it's a longer story about how it was that Pierre got nicknamed by John Baird, that the Conservative caucus always called him Skippy.
Well, it's funny because we're going to talk a little bit later on about kind of like how folks that are watching this might assume that everybody in Ottawa that are on the different teams don't really get along.
Yeah.
But sometimes you see, the gloves dropped in the house, but outside it's pretty cordial.
Well, it should be. And I don't like the whole teams analogy either because it shouldn't be about sports. We're elected to represent the constituents in our riding. To do good work, we should be working with each other. We should be able to talk to each other, exchange views. I mean, that's always my favorite description of being Canadian is to disagree without being disagreeable. And I don't want to lose that.
Well, that's exactly why we wanted to start this platform, because we want to get back to a place where folks actually listen to one another, no matter whether it's team or party or what have you, that folks actually listen to one another and can disagree with them still.
That's right. So, I mean, that's one of the things, I guess, if there's ever going to be an award, which there isn't, for Parliament for miscongeniality, I've got it. It's a lot.
I
know everybody.
There you go.
And I try really hard to obviously be respectful and find things we have in common, because otherwise, how does anything ever get done?
So we thought that may be a good place to start, how you actually got yourself to Parliament. And we understand that you studied theology.
Yes.
Right? You
Yes.
studied theology. How do you get from theology to environmental activist to lawyer to leader of the Green Party?
Well, it starts in a different direction.
Okay.
So I was an activist almost I can't say from birth, but when I was a small child, like an infant, my mother, who had been at that point not involved in issues or campaigning or politics, but she read in the newspaper somewhere that atmospheric nuclear weapons testing was going to cause a big increase in childhood leukemia. So I was born in the States, so we're talking about sort of an atmosphere politically of the Cold War, better dead than red, and an assumption that if you were against nuclear weapons testing, which was really, as my mom was, a mom saying, I don't think it's right that something that we're doing should cause children to get leukemia and die because the military can't test weapons underground. Wait a minute. So my mom leapt from being, housewife mom to being an activist. So my earliest days, I was involved, like I was the only kid that would warn the other kids in the playground not to eat the snow because it contained strontium-90. Other parents warned their kids not to eat the snow if it was yellow. Sorry, the way I've been like this a long time because I was raised by an activist mom. So about the time that I was, 12, 13, I decided the thing that I wanted to do with my life was environmental work. I don't know why, but I started early. By grade 10, I started an environmental club in my high school. And I've been doing environmental work one way or another but basically from forever. I didn't even think about being personally involved in politics until 2006. By that time, I had been studying theology for a while because my thought process was I'd been executive director of Sierra Club of Canada for 17 years. What do you do after that? At some point, you really should leave an organization so it has transition and it grows with change. And I thought, one thing I can think of that I'd want to do would be to be an Anglican parish priest. That would really be something. I mean, because I didn't want to go back to practicing law. I remember telling my mother, and I know I don't want to go into politics. My mom died in 2003, so for me, that's a real marker that I remember telling my mom, well, what am I going to do? And we talked about whether it would be a good fit. So that's how.
Did you grow up in a religious household?
No, not at all. My mother dragged us out of church this minute that the minister wouldn't take her petition against nuclear weapons testing.
Right. So, but are you still religious?
Oh, very.
Very?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I'm a practicing Anglican, which means I take, I live my life as inspired by constantly through prayer and constantly thinking, I mean, I know it's too trite to say that I always think, what would Jesus do? Sometimes I think, what would the Dalai Lama do? What would, what would someone do? Oh my God, what would Jane Goodall do? God, I'm going to miss anyway.
That's sad.
So I don't think I could do the work I do without faith, but and I know a lot of people hear that. And because the organized Christian movement that's in politics is the Christian right, so just say I'm in the Christian left, and you'll sort of
the Christian left. But okay, well, let me pick up on something that you said there. That faith, you wouldn't be able to do this if you didn't have faith. Why is faith kind of central for you and everything?
Because everything we're facing that must be done is basically impossible. So if you're not a person who's prepared to root yourself in miracles are possible, and things can change dramatically. I mean, I think it was miraculous that Nelson Mandela ever got out of jail and became president of a free South Africa. But it happened. Yeah. So there's things that happen. And I think if I didn't have a way of avoiding the notion of, well, this is the real world, or this is what it looks like, I believe there's a better world, and I think it's in all of us, and we can make things happen that are outside the realm of what looks possible. If we restrict our imagination to what looks possible, our kids don't have much of a future.
I think we want to keep you just in your past just a little bit longer and talk about the States. I also grew up in the U.S. and I came here to go to university to Canada.
Surrounded by Americans.
Yeah. And I don't have U.S. citizenship. Yay!
Yeah, you have to relinquish it, right?
I did.
Yeah. At the time, you had to give it up, right?
Yeah, and I managed to keep it not on me. No, thank you. 100% Canadian. I'm very glad.
You wouldn't want your citizenship back, though?
No, U.S. citizenship?
Yeah. What not?
Oh, the reasons. I'm Canadian, number one.
No, but to have dual.
No, why would I? And actually, as a Canadian, as a member of Parliament, you really can't without breaking U.S. law, because when you swear an oath to, as I did when I first got sworn in, to Her Majesty the Queen, her heirs and successors, you that's another way of totally renouncing my country, tis of thee. I mean, that's done. So I'm 100% Canadian, and as a member of Parliament, I think I should be.
Yeah.
Do you still have family back there?
Very, very little.
We're going to talk about Canada, but since we're already talking about the States, I was watching a press conference with you. I think it was like yesterday or something like that. You were saying that Trump, he's unpredictable, he's chaotic. Isn't that strategy working for him, though?
Well, if we are in, as some posit, an attention economy, it's got to be working, because no one can take their eyes off him. It's like rubbernecking when you're driving on the highway and there's a horrific crash. You just can't take your eyes off it. So it's working for him. Is it working for the U.S. economy? No. Is it working for social cohesion, for the betterment of people, for human rights? No. It's certainly not working for, it's not working for anybody except Trump, who's making more money out of it.
But has he kind of fundamentally changed the way politics, not only in that country, but just kind of around the world, is done, because it is that kind of economy
for
now?
better or for worse?
For better or for worse, yeah.
I hope that that he hasn't changed it for good. There's so much dangerous about what he's doing. His contempt for the United States Constitution is stunning. I mean, I did go to school in the U.S. enough to know that's not something you're supposed to be able to do as president. Wait a minute. I mean, and I often rant about this when I especially talk to school kids in my writing about why it is that Westminster parliamentary democracy and the Canadian system of government is so very different from that in the U.S. And it's a little thing called the American Revolution. And Canadians stayed basically loyal to King George III when it was clear he was completely off his head. And the loyalists from the U.S. came up in droves to Canada. The U.S. Constitution was supposed to be, because it was written by people who were really worried about abuse of power and the accumulation of power by one person. So the U.S. president is supposed to be held in check by checks and balances, like him he doesn't control the Congress. These are supposed to be separate entities. In Canada, on the other hand, if you're the leader of a party that wins a majority of the seats in Parliament, totally control both the executive and the legislative. We don't have checks and balances in Canada. It's amazing how much that sort of, I think it's the U.S. TV, U.S. cultural immersion that people actually talk about electing a prime minister, which we don't do, or, the idea that we have checks and balances here, which we don't, which is one of the reasons we really need electoral reform, but that's another topic altogether. Still, I mean, I am...
Wasn't that supposed to come? Were we supposed to get electoral reform?
I do
Wait a
remember,
second.
what was his name? I think, what was it? Began with a J, he promised it. I'm very worried about the threat that Trump poses to democracy in the United States. I'm not nearly as worried about Canada because we have our own different system of government. And I think we have more shared values. And unfortunately, we are moving in the same direction as the U.S. in terms of a larger gap between the wealthiest and the poorest, but we're nowhere near in as bad shape as they are in the United States. And we also have other allies and other friends, and I hope that we're going to be able to pull together, and because obviously Trump has smashed the things that even were created by neoliberals, would you think he'd be comfy with the things that Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan and Brian Mulroney created, but he's not, smashing them all to bits. Anything like a predictable global trading system, he doesn't care. He's a mercantilist and he likes tariffs, and he's off the rails in terms of the things that you would imagine a Republican would have defended.
I'll just pick up on something you said about democracy and take us back to Canada. Proportional representation, for example, a better, some people think it's a better representation of democracy and electing our officials. But
basically, everybody does.
Yeah,
sorry,
but it can't be done. No one's doing it. There's no political will, right?
Sorry, I cut you off.
No, go for it.
No, it's just when you have a system, as I just described, where a prime minister with a leader of a party with a majority of the seats controls everything, whether or not they have even 50 plus 1% public support. So you can have a prime minister with a majority government that's gotten 40% of the vote. So those are called false majority governments. It's really dangerous. And that's why I see the need for proportional representation to basically inoculate our democracy against, and there's no one like this on the current political horizon, but we can imagine a sort of a Canadian version of populism, fascist, dictator, and you really don't want them to have all the power if they have less than 50% popular support.
I mean, to Carmen's point, there are other priorities, and it doesn't seem as though there is that political will.
Because the big parties love it, even if it's unfair to them this cycle. And they, gee whiz, I mean, Andrew Scheer and Erin O'Toole, when they were leading their parties, had more votes than the Liberals that formed government.
Yeah.
But still, does it occur to them, gee, this system is really unfair. We ought to reform it so that if we get more votes, we get seats that reflect the votes we got. And it actually, in terms of national unity, would be so important to make sure that all those voters for Liberal, NDP, or Greens in Alberta see themselves reflected.
Are there Greens in Alberta?
Yeah, there are. Yeah, there are.
Where are they?
But they buy. Of course there. Well, there's the Green Party.
Actually,
they fight really hard. They do really well. We nearly won the Calgary Centre by-election, by the way, in 2012 when Chris Turner ran.
Yeah.
We were, there are moments where people say, gee, what are Greens? Oh, let me look at our platform, which no one looked at this year. For instance, we were the party that paid down the deficit faster than anyone else. And we were the party that had more planks of our platform costed by the Parliamentary Budget Office than anybody else. So, and yes, of course, we're Greens, which means, and it's a global movement. So it's a good party name because it translates into every language easily. if I was starting the Green Party, I would think, another name might be better, but never mind. When you look at Alberta and think about the way people vote, and they get reflected in the House of Commons in a way that makes it very unlikely that if there's a Liberal government, you're going to have a lot of people around the cabinet table from Alberta.
Well, yeah.
That's not a good thing. And if we had the proportion of people who voted for any party in particular reflected in the parliament we get, then you get that representation across the country that doesn't, because nothing like first past the post to create a situation where the Bloc Québécois can, and in fact did, form official opposition. You have a party that runs in one province only, but first past the post totally rewards that. And so it has, for the good of the country, it certainly would be great if one of the bigger parties finally decided that their own self-interest, which is all they care about, and their ultimate quest for power, was actually not well served by first past the post. Time to look. That's what it'll take to change it.
If someone's listening right now and they're not necessarily involved in politics or this world, when they hear your name, they tie you to the Green Party. You're so tied to it. How do you announce that you're going to be stepping down, right?
As soon as there's a leadership race and I can pass the torch.
So how do you go about separating yourself, your identity from the Green Party, like giving them a push to go and flourish on their own? Like, how does that happen?
I mean, it's just, I went through the same dilemma I mentioned earlier when I was trying to figure out, I've been executive director of Sierra Club for 17 years, but I've really got to move on. And I wasn't the first leader of the Green Party. I was the 9th leader of the Green Party, but we've had a leader in between since I won leadership in 2006, and I stepped down completely in 2019. And it didn't go so well, but that wasn't because the Green Party couldn't separate itself from us. Basically, pick any party and think about it. Succession planning in political parties has got to be in terms of like business settings or institutional settings. How do you do that? It's really hard.
Yeah.
And it's particularly hard when you're going to have a small caucus pretty much inevitably.
I asked Pierre Poilievre this as well, because he's facing a leadership review in January, but there's different factions of the Conservative Party.
Oh, yes.
There's different factions of the Green Party. How do you, or the next leader, how do you unite the party to all come together as Greens?
Well, I mean, we don't have the problem. The Conservative Party, after all, has been wrenched by really large divides. So the Progressive Conservative Party of Joe Clark and Brian Moore. No. We've never had a branch of the party say, we're splitting off and forming a new party because you guys are terrible and you're kind of not really green. You're kind of this putridy, mossy color. So that doesn't happen to us, right? I mean, you get people talking because we're democracy, right? Yeah. We believe in grassroots democracy. But when I think back to what it was like, I mean, and back to debates, when Deb Gray, who's a friend of mine, when Deb won that by-election to be the first Reform Party MP, and she was faced with so much hostility from all sides. But Deb winning that first seat meant that Preston Manning, who didn't yet have a seat in Parliament, represented Reform in the debates. Yeah. When you look at how Reform grew to the point that by the time you get through Reform, Alliance, and all the steps in between to Stephen Harper, and then that moment when Peter MacKay broke his word, having taken over the Progressive Conservative Party on the promise that he would never merge with Reform. I remember Margaret Atwood's description was that the Reform Party had cannibalized the Progressive Conservative Party and then torn off this new skin. It was sort of a sci-fi image and emerged as this new thing. So that's why, I mean...
Descriptive image.
It was what happened. I mean, and like right. Joe Clark, Flora MacDonald, the old... You're too young. I'm sorry for saying you're too ageist of me. But just do you remember the term red Tories?
Yeah,
yes, of course.
Well, okay, so red Tories are like definitely extinct and killed by...
Are they?
Oh, pretty much. But I mean, again, if they're not, then back to your earlier point.
Yeah.
The Conservative Party is a party that had been really wrenched into and then patched back together. So the challenge for Greens is really just to say, we got to get out and knock on doors earlier. what we have going for us is never going to be having more money than the other guys. It's having more volunteers and having people willing to go door to door to door. And we also have Greens provincially. So this last year, for example, the Ontario Greens, they were in an election right before we had to retool, ramp up, and be in a federal election. And the British Columbia Greens just elected a new leader.
Yeah, she's like 25, right?
Yeah, she's brilliant,
Yeah.
Emily Lowen. And we're going to see transitions, New Brunswick Greens, Prince Edward Island. We formed official opposition in PEI. So it's not like we're only the federal Greens. So you look across the country at faces of the Green Party. A lot of them are provincial levels. Some of them, Vancouver City Council has people running under party banners. Usually municipal politics doesn't. So, I mean, the splits are exaggerated by people who love chatting with reporters and saying, well,
the mainstream media.
Yeah.
Like,
but I mean,
well, we're not the mainstream media anymore. So.
Whatever access we have to the Fifth Estate, God knows this country, democracy suffers when local newspapers close. Democracy suffers when a supper time news channel closes. Yep. All of that. But just saying where we are as Greens, the unity issue isn't an issue for us.
You know, in terms of electability for Green members as well, it's also the issue set sometimes, right? People associate Green with climate change and managing that issue. And, you know, not so far back, that was a priority for a lot of Canadians, and that sort of dropped off a bit too, right?
Well, I mean, all the other parties talked about it, but we were the only party that cared about it. So who's left standing? And we have a and the time to act on the climate crisis is dwindling. But at the same time, and it's ironic, I mean, you can help me figure this out, Travis, but more Canadians all the time have been personally impacted. People affected by poor air quality because of forest fire smoke. People who've been evacuated from their communities, from floods, from fires. We had 619 British Columbians die in 4 days in summer of 2021. And it's like, you know, east of the Rockies, nobody noticed. But more people have been impacted, and scratch the surface just a little bit of every Canadian. And they're saying, well, we really do need to ensure that we get this under control. And parties will talk about it. And I mean, I heard Pierre talking about it the other day with Catherine Cullen on the House.
Yeah.
I thought, I really do have to give him my book explaining climate change so he can get ahead on this one. But yeah.
Well, so what would you say to Pierre in terms of what needs to change when it comes to their policies?
And even the Liberal government.
And even the Liberals. I mean, because you didn't grade Justin Trudeau's government very highly.
No, they squandered $36 billion building a pipeline that the private sector had walked away from. And right now, I had a piece in Sunday's Star and the Toronto Star basically saying, Mark Carney, where'd you go? I mean, he delivered this brilliant speech when he was governor of the Bank of England, when he was speaking to Lloyd's of London and saying, basically, climate needs to be baked into financial decisions. You need to have transparency around the risk factors around climate change in how you invest. And yet we're not hearing, I try to suspend disbelief and keep open the hope that there's more coming that we'll see. But I mean, for Pierre Poilievre, I wish I could get modern Conservatives to look at the record of Brian Mulroney, who got voted Canada's greenest prime minister because he did a ton of stuff, including the Montreal Protocol to protect the ozone layer, fighting acid rain. Conservative values, this right-left divide, only started creating a schism around climate change in the Harper years. Right up till then, it was like the healthcare system. You weren't going to find a Canadian Conservative leader saying, let's privatize our healthcare system, because they know where Canadian values are. Similarly, you didn't hear, until Stephen Harper said that the Kyoto Protocol was a socialist plot, until then, you didn't have really big left-right divides in Canada.
So, but when it is now polarized, and when this conversation comes up, some people hear you talking about getting rid of pipelines, and they'll say, okay, that means getting rid of prosperity, getting rid of jobs in Alberta. You know, they'll be afraid that, you're moving away from Alberta Energy, which bankrolls so many national programs. So how do you get beyond that and into the nuance of the conversation, because it seems as though there's fear mongering on both sides, some would say.
Some would say, but I think telling the truth isn't fear mongering. It really is a violation of free speech, as one of those truisms from law school is, you have free speech is a right, but you can't yell fire in a crowded movie theater. But on the other hand, if the movie theater is on fire, somebody has to say, stay calm.
Yes.
Move out.
Yeah.
This is not a safe place. Take action. So in that way, I think it's important for Greens, no matter how, we don't judge our policies or our platforms based on, is this going to be popular with everyone? What's our moral responsibility as grown-ups here? We're looking at a reality that, number one, no more than Alberta is on a separate planet. Canada's not on a separate planet. And if we're looking at a collapse of human civilization, potentially in the lifetime of our children, if we actually accelerate climate change. Climate change isn't one event with one end point.
Yeah.
It's a whole range of possible outcomes, some of which we can still achieve, would allow us to continue much as we are now in a viable human civilization with functioning economies where we actually take better care of everyone and make sure we have strong communities in, and feeling safe.
I completely get that. But if you've got a Green candidate, say, knocking on the door in Fort McMurray or something like that, and it's an oil worker or somebody who's working on, maybe a pipeline or something like that, comes to the door and they've got to pay their bills, they've got a family. What you're talking about is serious. It's real, but it's also to them somewhat abstract, right? So how do you have that conversation? How do you have that conversation?
But what Fort Mac went through was the beast.
Sure.
That changes people. That's a built-in trauma that you look at, you say there's going to be
localizing it then, I guess.
Yeah, and it's also saying global, climate change is a global issue, but the impacts are really local. And so how do you prepare? How do you have community resilience? And for that matter, I've got friends who work in the oil sands. I got a lot of friends. My husband's youngest brother is involved in the industry there. And I talk to an awful lot of people who say, we know this isn't for the next 30 years. We've got to look at a pathway out of this. And for Alberta as a province has the best potential for solar energy, has huge potential in wind energy that are profitable private sector opportunities that Danielle Smith decided for ideological reasons to say, not doing that. Now, wait a minute. You've got jobs in those opportunities and affordability. The Okotoks solar project delivers electricity at less than 3 cents a kilowatt hour. You think that's not going to help the average Canadian to bring down electricity bills? Stop wasting energy. Start running on cheaper renewables. And for the oil sands workers, the potential for geothermal power from the abandoned oil wells of Alberta. So the same guys that drilled those wells are the very best people to go in there and get the heat at depth of geothermal. The highest part of the cost of going geothermal is drilling the hole. Well, I think last I looked, 100,000 abandoned oil wells in Alberta. That's a liability on the books for the province. It's bleeding red ink. Why not say, let's take this opportunity of rehabilitating these sites and creating, if it's not enough heat at depth to generate electricity on its own, it surely is enough to pre-warm the water to run a whole bunch of greenhouses and other operations at surface. And for some of those wells, they could actually generate electricity.
I just want to take you on a bit of a turn because I know you're big on animal welfare issues. We've worked together on some of those. But recently, there's been a lot of buzz about ostriches.
You don't say.
So
yeah, I heard you getting I saw the clip. When was it? Was that?
I did that. I was talking yesterday, and they asked about ostrich because the Greens' position is the Canadian Food Inspection Agency should not be proceeding with a cull until they've actually retested that flock, and I think that's a reasonable position.
And why won't they retest it?
They say it won't make any difference. We could get false negatives, we could get false positives, but the reality of it is the people who own that farm, and they've gone to court, and they have a lot of public sympathy and a lot of concern for animal welfare, let's see what the test results are now, because the last infection was, or at least the last one we know of, because there hasn't been more testing, was more than a year ago.
I think people are looking at this though, and they're saying that this is government overreach. What do you make of that conversation?
I don't think it's government overreach. I think governments can make mistakes, but the overreach is when, I mean, remember Pierre Trudeau's favorite line, that the governments have no place in the bedrooms of the nation.
Mm-hmm.
Right, that would be overreach. But if you're talking about a transmissible virus, a zoonotic virus that will move from animals into people, potentially. We had an adolescent British Columbian about a year ago who got really sick with avian flu. Nobody knows how it was transmitted to this young man. He apparently was not working in a poultry barn. No one can figure out, did he come across dead fowl somewhere in hiking? Nothing. And of course, I haven't seen his medical records, nor should I. But from what I understand from every conversation about this case, no one can figure out where it got. Now, as somebody who cares about public health and a healthy population, it is actually the government's job to monitor and see, are we seeing a risk? That's one of the reasons in terms of animal welfare organizations too, shut down markets for wild animals, particularly wild animal markets for food. That's probably where COVID came from the People's Republic of China. There's things we can do that are sensible, but I do think everything needs to be transparent. There's lots of skepticism about some of what happened during COVID. I get that.
Yeah.
But we do need to say that is actually, nobody else is going to do that. That's kind of government's job. You need to have experts who are working in the public interest who investigate. Whether they come to the right decision, that's, again, you get to debate that in the public square.
So just to be clear on the ostrich stuff,
Yeah.
like you would want to see the flock retested?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. When it comes to, you mentioned COVID, right? I read that you said that one of the hardest calls of your career was in 2022 with that Emergencies Act vote.
Yeah. Well, because I wanted to make sure I got the law right. But this probably, I have going to law school is one of the best breaks I ever got, because I couldn't afford to go to undergrad, so I had no undergrad degree. I'd been waitressing and cooking for years, and then found out that you could, and I mentioned earlier the fighting environmental battles in Cape Breton and stopping bloodworm spraying. Getting to go to law school was an enormous break. And I had a law prof who just kept, it was like a scene out of Paper Chase. This guy, so lovely. And he would bang his cane across the desk of the front row students, would really wake you up, and say, develop the habit of thoroughness. So for my sins, I developed the habit of thoroughness. So I like to really dig in and study stuff.
Sure.
So the Emergencies Act, number one, isn't the War Measures Act. I think it's a remarkably well-crafted piece of legislation. Talked to Perrin Beatty about it. He was one of the people who drafted it. It was really interesting to see how a bunch of parliamentarians, when they weren't in an emergency, developed legislation to protect civil liberties, to create opportunity to say, well, this is an insurrection kind of emergency. This is a public welfare kind of emergency. So what I had to do was thread that needle. Is the definition for emergency came not from sort of a common sense understanding, a national security threat, came from the CSIS legislation, and it's quite convoluted. So I had to go through it and really make sure that I was voting the way I thought was legally correct.
Yeah.
And also talk to, at the time, Marco Mendicino and David Lametti, who was not public security and justice ministers, and say, I've got to make very, very sure that this isn't creating some kind of precedent that can be misused in the future. Let's walk through this. And I got them to commit to things on the floor of the House of Commons. I know if it ever goes to court, those records are going to matter, of this is what it applies, and it wouldn't apply in this case. And no, you can't, under the Emergencies Act, put any military on the streets, and you have to have oversight from Parliament. So it was difficult because it took me the time to make sure I was voting the way I felt was legitimate and legally correct.
Looking back now, though, do you think it was? I mean, I have a place on Bank Street still, right? It's just up the street. So I was in the middle of it, and I was also working for CBC covering it.
Yeah.
I mean, were there pop-ups of incidents here or
Yes,
there?
lots.
Sure.
Yeah.
But overall, I mean, it wasn't violent.
Well,
It wasn't like January 6th, right?
I don't. Okay, I'll say this about. I mean, I've been part of nonviolent civil disobedience, and I think it's an absolute right within a democracy for nonviolent civil disobedience. This didn't feel safe. I was talking the other day. I was debating a farmer in the House, and he's a nice new MP. He's a white guy from Calgary, and he said I was able to walk through there fine. I wasn't. RCMP ended up telling me you can't try that again.
Where, like on Wellington?
Yeah, because people saw me, they knew me, and so they said, this isn't safe for you. You can't come here.
Well, looking back, though, I mean, I think, when I covered this as well, and I guess you look back with more clarity, I guess, is there anything around that time that you think was, because this is the criticism now, government overreach again, this and that.
So at all.
I don't think so.
And I felt the same way today. And that's because I read the legislation, and I think it's massively misunderstood that this was an abuse of civil liberties. It wasn't in terms of the very careful way the Emergencies Act is written. So, I mean, the convoy issue, I think, and the way that was handled was most of the mistakes were made in the first few hours, first few days, by having the Ottawa police, for some reason, more or less acting like concierges for very large trucks and saying you can park here along Wellington, it won't matter, and you can stay here.
Right.
And what a lot of people wouldn't know who didn't live in Ottawa at the time, and I have a lot of constituents who were inspired by the convoy, who felt like it's like Woodstock, look what's happening is so great. But being here wasn't like, I mean, I don't know, I wasn't at Woodstock, maybe it wasn't any fun, but it was't a safe place to be. I couldn't get.
We disagree.
Well, could you get a bus? Could I get a bus to work?
I mean, like,
I couldn't get a bus.
Sure.
I couldn't get a cab.
Yeah.
I couldn't walk to work. I think I have a right to be able to get to my job.
Sure.
And I couldn't. Everything was shut down. So the freedom and the liberty to do your job as a member of Parliament elected from British Columbia, to be able to get to work, was not something I could do. So I wasn't being singled out for abuse. But when I think about, and I know from hotel managers in the city, that every hotel room was taken up weeks ahead, and that the guys who were, or women, who owned those trucks, they'd lean on the horn nonstop, but when their shift was over, they went to a hotel room, and another convoy member would take over that seat in that truck, keep the engine running, and keep leaning on the horn. That was abusive to the people who lived in this community. And then I heard people say, oh, well, they had it coming. They live in Ottawa. I'm sorry, that's not right. This is the national capital. You don't deserve abuse because you happen to live and work in Ottawa.
Okay,
I think we should leave that there.
Well, I mean, listen, it can't be censored, so we can disagree on certain things, right?
I didn't expect we to agree on everything. But you still have but you know what? Do you remember how many businesses?
Yeah, there was a hot tub and they set up in my parking lot, right? And
fun.
I'm right up the street on Bank, right?
Yeah.
So and I had to work in it, but I mean, I just didn't feel threatened, like my physical safety, but maybe it's and
I know of people in Parliament Hill workers who are gay, who were very threatened, and I know of women of color who did not feel safe walking through those zones. And it was a physical reality. I literally physically couldn't get to the door of the building. And when I tried to cross the street, the RCMP, they show up out of nowhere. I don't have security. So I was quite surprised when the RCMP showed up out of nowhere and said, you got to leave where you are right now. And I realized there were people walking towards me, and it was a menacing moment. And the RCMP showed up out of nowhere and said, Ms. May, you can't be here. And they had to take me up a back way because I was kind of trapped where I was.
All right.
We like to.
Carmen's like, let's move on.
We like to end our
Are we at the end
discussions with
we are.
The uncensored rapid fire. It's meant to be a bit lighter, a bit fun. So
I mean, discussing the convoy is always fun. Sorry.
Okay, so we're gonna ask you a bunch of questions, and you just
okay.
Who is the biggest showboat in Parliament?
Oh my! Well, it's Pierre.
Well,
I mean,
really?
he's the class.
No, but like of all your time there.
Oh, of all my time.
Yeah.
Oh my. Okay. Justin Trudeau.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
How come?
Well, because he was very dramatic, and he was, you know, and even before he became Liberal leader, I would say, yeah,
Okay.
charismatic and notable, and yeah.
Okay.
I mean, God, Stephen Harper was such an introvert; he couldn't have been a showboat. Sometimes John Baird was awfully funny, but I mean, if you go all the way back, and I'm thinking all the people, but still, Pierre is the class clown, and he's funny. He is funny, and he plays to his caucus like he's doing. I'm here till Thursday. Have the veal.
Who's the best debater besides you?
Best debater in Parliament. Let me think. I have to say, I think Sean Fraser keeps his head on his shoulders pretty well.
Okay.
And Michael Chong, hands down, let me just say. Member of Parliament for Wellington Halton Hills. He may be the last progressive conservative left, but he's keeping it under a bushel if he is.
Huh.
Good debate. For me, good debate is respectful and based on facts. So the heckling, I've never heckled, not once since I got elected.
Yeah.
I don't think heckling is part of good debate. But of respectful, serious debate, Tom Mulcair was great at it. And Yves-François Blanchet, leader of the Bloc, is on his feet, sharp, eloquent, smart. Yeah.
One MP, well, it says who you'd never want to be stuck in an elevator with, but I'm going to change this to say if you had to be stuck in an elevator with an MP
Positive.
from another party, is there somebody that you'd be like, yeah, that's who I'd want to hang out with?
I'm going out on a limb here and tell you, Travis, there is not one single member of Parliament I wouldn't enjoy being in an elevator.
Really?
Yeah, they're all I love everybody. It's a challenge sometimes. Some days I think to myself it's a lot easier to love all my colleagues than to like them. But no, I'm really comfortable with everybody, and I'm grateful for friendships, and there isn't anyone that I wouldn't be comfortable being stuck in an elevator with.
It's amazing.
Have you got a hidden talent?
I'm a great cook.
You are.
What's your best dish?
Yeah.
Oh gosh, I just made an eggplant parmesan. My eggplant parmesan is the kind of thing that makes meat eaters think, "Are you sure this is for vegetarians? This is really, really good." So yeah, I really love, because I'm from the Maritimes, and I am, as I mentioned before, waitress and cook. My parents ran a restaurant, so in crustacean terms, I am a mass murderer, and I love a chance to cook Cape Breton lobster, and there is no better source of great meals from leftovers. If your leftover choices and you've just cooked lobster, one of my favorite dishes is lobster Newburgh. I mean, oh my God, it's
really
can't go wrong.
Okay. Is that hard to cook? Like, does that take a long time or no?
It just takes a long time to get all the little teeny weeny bits of lobster out of all the teeny weeny bits of shell.
Okay, we'll see if you do this one. It can't be censored. So, favorite curse word.
Well, it's so funny. I tend to say fiddly-dee.
That's the worst one I've heard yet.
My husband finds it a riot. But
fiddly-dee.
But I did marry. No, okay. So my husband, John Kidder, in his youth, in his 20s, he was a working cowboy, for real.
Yeah.
He rode around on a saddle horse that belonged to someone else to move around somebody else's thousands of head of cattle.
Like Yellowstone.
What? No guns, no stupid stuff. He hates Yellowstone. He a legitimate working cowboy.
Okay.
But he does say fuck a lot.
He does, eh?
Yes, he does.
Does that annoy you?
No, I love him to bits. But when he's cooking, it's particularly bad because yelling fuck is interspersed with pots banging and falling all over the place. But anyway, love him to bits. But he can't say, he says, why do you say fiddly-dee? I said, I don't know.
So you'll just be, if you have to like scream something, you'll be like, fiddly-dee.
No, I don't scream it. Oh, fiddly-dee. That's like that.
Okay.
Since you brought up your relationship with your husband, what's your secret to that long-lasting marriage?
Well, we're coming up on 7 years, Carmen. So
or whatever partnership, relationship.
We started dating. Not a word of a lie. We started dating at the end of September 2018, and we were married Earth Day, April 22nd, 2019. So, and I said to him, because I was trying to sound mature, to every, if any women of a certain age are out there thinking, I give up on men.
I was going to ask you that.
Men, shit in disguise. I've given up on them forever. I said that to myself many times over the years. Sorry, well, not exactly like that.
Yeah.
And then John came along, and so it's my first marriage. And anyway, I just want to say, you never know. Just saying, my first marriage at 65. You just never know. I just feel so lucky. I was a single mom with a great, great daughter and great stepkids.
Yeah.
And like, I'm a happy person, and I love my family a ton. But secret to being married 7 years so far, just don't die. But I was trying to sound mature. That's what I was going to say, Garmin. I was trying to sound mature because when I was in this great relationship, suddenly, and I go, oh my God, I'm so in love with this guy. And I'm thinking, okay, be calm, stay calm, try to sound mature. So I said, we don't have to rush. We could take our time. And he looked at me and said, honey, do you know how old I am? So that's, and he sings and plays guitar. And one of our favorite Canadian singers of all time, or singers of all time, is Stan Rogers. And right before he was singing me this lovely song that I love. And I just want to see your smiling face 45 years from now. And I said, honey, I think maybe we should change that to I'd love to see your smiling face 4 or 5 years from now, because that's more realistic. Because, yeah. Anyway.
So did you know immediately with him?
Yeah.
Did you guys meet on Tinder or something?
No. No. Actually, we met. John is one of the founders of the Green Party of British Columbia.
I know. I read that. I read that.
And when we met, it was because, so it didn't like really start right away because he was kind of slow and dumb and didn't notice I had a crush on him. So anyway.
Oh, really?
I went to campaign for him in 2013 in the Nicola Valley in a provincial election with the BC Greens.
Yeah.
And I knew kind of, but then, you don't want to be, it's so sad being rejected. And you think, okay, I'm just going to give up on this. I have a crush on him, but he's obviously not interested. And it wasn't till 5 years later that it dawned on him that well, actually, I had a friend who said to him, how thick are you, really? You obviously love her. She obviously loves you. What's wrong with you? Ask her out. So, well, I don't love her like that. I mean, I think she's wonderful. Blah, blah, blah. So anyway, it worked out great.
You are always a pleasure to interview. My last question is going to be, what is your... Because I don't know if I'm going to see you again because I'm not up in Ottawa all that often.
I can come to Toronto. It's not that there's a train.
There is a train. There's the Via. What is your message to the younger generation of this party that's going to be coming up next? The next set of leadership for the Greens to take this into the next level? Well, for every young person, for God's sake, don't give up and don't imagine for 1 minute that this is your fault. Let us who created this problem in older generations do our part in responsibility to fix it and work with you. I think there's a pincer movement that can happen in terms of public mobilization with angry grandmoms like me and young people. And in the middle, I know there's a whole lot of 45 to 55-year-olds who can barely hang on to having to do the job, go to work, pay the mortgage. Yep. I think that's the group that's least likely to be able to take on what needs to be taken on. Mm-hmm. But young people and seniors together, like whenever my grandbaby stretches, she's a little habit. She stretches her arm out and her fist is clenched. So I've started thinking, the babies united can never be defeated. But the babies and the grandmas together, well, and we need to fix things, and we need to trust each other and love each other. And this country, of all places to be in 2025, there's no country where I would want to be except Canada, because I have faith in all of us to work together to fix things, and they need fixing. Elizabeth May, thanks for coming on Can't Be Censored. Thank you. Fiddly-dee.